Hi, it's Maria, and I'm doing another Forgiveness to Love video, and this one is titled Crimes and Torts, and I think you're really going to like this one. Rather expansive list of some and not all of the crimes involved during the 25 years of drama and trauma of my story. And I've also added several torts to the list. And in the legal sense, torts are injuries committed against someone. So here we have about 140 crimes and over 30 torts for a running total of about 170 infractions. And you're probably picking up your jaw off the floor now when you hear about these atrocities and find it absolutely chilling, which is a perfectly normal reaction, actually. It's the people who hear about these crimes yet ignore or discount them that truly have abnormal psychological, if not human, reactions, right? I mean, how can people just sit there and just hear about crimes going on throughout our world? And people are just so complacent, they're so blasé about it. It's shocking. At least in this series, I'm listing them. The ones that I've either heard about, that people have told me about, that I've witnessed, that I've known, or that others, have shared their experiences. So it's truly beyond tragic that such uncivilized and primordial behavior actually goes on in our country for years and years and years without recourse. And I'll tell you, many times we realize that few want to hear about them, and even fewer care. That's the true tragedy. So the list keeps growing and growing. And what's the saying? Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Well, such can be said of human depravity for sure. So you will become apprised of over 170 barbaric displays of inhumanity. So here is the list in alphabetical order. And I just wanted to add that, this happens in this happens microcosmically. And yet, whatever happens microcosmically is actually an example of what happens on a much larger scale. In fact, it could be on a global scale. So when we see things in our own little environment or in our own locale, then we understand that in fact this is not only happening here, but it's happening here, and it's happening here, and it's happening all over. And so we can really kind of expand it to share in much of what's going on in the world. So I'll begin the list again. It's in alphabetical order. There's abusive sexual contact, aggravated assault, there's aggravated identity theft, there's assault and battery, there's bank fraud, there's blackmail, there's breaking and entering, there's bribery, there's burglary, there's business malpractice, there's buying, receiving, or possessing stolen property, there's carjacking, accidents, and other motor vehicle incidents to thieve personal property and or seriously injure passengers and others. There's certification of checks, i.e. fraud. There's child abuse. There's coercion. There are computer crimes. There is the concealment of assets. There is a continuing criminal enterprise. There's conveying false information. There's copyright fraud. And there's counterfeiting. There's credit and debit card fraud. There's crimes aboard there's crimes aboard aircraft. There's criminal damage, criminal infringement of a copyright. There's cruelty to children. There are cyber crimes. There is date rape. There is defamation. There is to deprive and or sabotage legal representation. There's to deprive and or sabotage medical care. There's the disclosure of confidential information. There's domestic violence. There's drug trafficking. There's possession. So it's drug trafficking and or possession. There's elder fraud. There's embezzlement against the estate. There's employment fraud. Entrapment. There's espionage. There's extortion. There are false declarations before the grand jury or court. There's false information and hoaxes. There are false pretenses. There are false profiles using Photoshop on sex sites to misrepresent the purchase by enraged customers to create dangerous situations for the victims. Now, some of these may not be exact names of crimes that one would come across often. However, these are my renditions of things that I have been told, and so I've tried to describe them as best I could. There are false statements by professionals relating to healthcare and thus the deprivation of appropriate treatment and care. There are financial transactions with foreign governments. There's forgery. There's fraud activity in connection with electronic mail. There's follow, stalk, survey, and harass. There's fraud against the government. There's gang stalking. There's hacking crimes of the internet, phone, and computer. Yes, there's healthcare fraud. There's harassment. There's homestead fraud. There's impersonation. There's influencing of jurors. There's insider trading crimes. There's insurance fraud. Intellectual property fraud. Intent to commit kidnapping. Intent to commit murder. Intent to commit serious injury via a motor vehicle. There's intent to falsify guilt, re contempt of court. There's interstate domestic violence. There's intimidation. There's investment and securities fraud. There's larceny, theft, legal malpractice, libel, lying under oath, mail fraud, manslaughter, medical healthcare fraud, medical malpractice. There's money laundering. There's mortgage fraud. There's murder. There's obstruction of criminal investigations. There's obstruction of justice. There's officers failing to make reports. There's pedophilia. There's perjury. There's pirating. There's poisoning of food and water. There's product tampering. There's prostitution. There's property crimes. Public corruption. There's the receiving the proceeds of extortion. There's retaliating against a witness, victim, or an informant. There's robbery. There's sabotage. There's serious injury via public transportation. There's sex crimes. There's sex exploitation. There's slander. There's solicitation to commit a crime of violence. Tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. Tampering with consumer products. tax evasion, theft, theft of trade secrets, threats to inflict bodily harm, threats to destroy. There's torture. There's trafficking in counterfeit goods or services. There's trespassing. There's the unauthorized removal of classified documents. There's vandalism. There's video voyeurism. There's violent crimes. There's white-collar crimes. There's wire fraud. And then we have the torts. Those are injuries done to another. There's emotional abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress. There's negligent infliction of emotional distress. There's narcissistic abuse, psychological harassment, nuisance, invasion of privacy, malicious falsehood. There's wrongful death. There's contributory negligence, negligence per se, breach of confidence, lost wages, malice. It's very weird because I can write the list, and then whoever's on my computer, whatever stalker, creepo, they kind of change words around, and so I look at the list and I think, wait, what is that? Anyway, it's done to kind of throw me off, but that's okay. We're not going to let that stop us. There's damage to personal property. There's conversion of personal property. There's trespass to land. There's fraudulent inducement in probate litigation. There's tortious interference of business. There's tortious interference with a prospective contract. There's interference with commerce by threats or violence. There's tortious interference with an expectancy of inheritance and fraudulent inducement in probate disputes. There's tortious interference in inter vivos gifts. There's tortious interference in inter vivos transfer. There's tortious interference with business expectancy. There's tortious interference with prospective economic advantage elements. There's wrongful interference with a business relationship. And there's wrongful interference with a contract. So there you have it. And quite honestly, we can be in absolute disbelief, as everyone should be, that we don't see paddy wagons the size of passenger trains carting off some, if not all, of these perpetrators. Yet such is the current state of affairs. And I want you to know that I am so grateful that you are here with me. And my goal is to open your eyes as to what is happening to our fellow brothers and sisters. And on some level, because we remember that we truly are one. And thus what happens to one of us happens to all of us on an energetic level. So there is no escaping the truth. And it's by design, because as we awaken, we can feel the connection and we hold greater compassion for the beautiful souls around us. And that's what we're really here to do. It's to really know, to expand our soul, and to really recognize the other souls in our lives. And so I thank you for sharing your energy for this little get-together. And join me at the next Forgiveness to Love video, okay? And in the meantime, I wish you many, many miracles. And remember, I love you. Good night.